That one either. Unfreeze this. Good. Do we actually have audio? Like we do. All right. Do updates, announcements, or whatever we're calling them.
Yep. Hello, everybody. How's it going? My name is Levi. I'm president of Springfield Devs. Thank you so much for making it out tonight. A big one here. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
This is the power of it.
Right, exactly. Yep. Still, it's great that you're here. Hopefully you got yourself to some pizza, and hopefully you learned something in the presentation today. First thing I want to start with is this event couldn't be possible, and any of our events could be possible without all of our sponsors. So please shout out, please give them a big round of applause. They make all this possible.
Yay,
I am fairly certain these are probably hiring, so if you are looking for something, definitely check out their websites. There's nothing specific on our website that links off to that kind of stuff yet, but it doesn't have like pages and stuff if that's what you're looking for something. In terms of community announcements real quick, I know with OpenSGF wanted to do a quick shout out, so I'll let him about that.
Hi, I'm Fred. I am co-captain of OpenSGF, a Code for America Brigade. I here is also co-captain. We are looking for volunteers to help volunteer their time and skills to produce applications, websites, even brochure websites, or general project management, design work to community and also nationally as well through Code for America. If you're interested, we meet here every Tuesday, 6 o'clock, factory. Barring holidays, of course, and yeah, so we hope to see the website, opensgf.org. Also, lots of
JavaScript, and
it's eating the word. Have a go application.
The classic software engineer. If we're partnering with NET, if you're interested in volunteering, real quick, show of hands, does anyone else have any announcements? Up here. Okay. Without that, then I will go ahead and hand this off to Tiffany Ford to tell us all about. So, take it away.
community announcement from me, though. Yeah. So if you're not on our Discord, you can find it on the website. So our website website, sgf.dev. You can go to the Discord section here at the top and find information on how to join the Discord. There is currently a survey link in the general section of the Discord asking about preferences for our holiday party. We're wanting to get that locked down by the end of September, so your input is helpful in kind of guiding decisions. So we've narrowed it down to a couple of options based on quotes that we've received. And we are planning on doing that Tuesday in December that our usual meeting night would be, which is December 7th. So if you have any feedback about that, please fill out that board so we can use that to choose and hopefully get that booked and then done talking about the holiday party. So help me God. It feels like it's been months. All right, talk about Maui. Are we super excited? Do we know what Maui is? Good. If you don't, this is what this is about, because about what it is and a little bit about what it isn't. And, you can see here the talk is really all kinds of questions. And even though it should be far more baked now than it is, definitely not. So we're going to talk about things that we know and things that we think are going to happen. And then I'll give you a little bit of a demo. I didn't get nearly as deep in this as I would have liked. I'm working a lot of jobs right now. I think I'm on hour 14 today of working, so hopefully this isn't too all over the place. But basically, is .NET's answer to what they've been trying to accomplish for a while, which was this multi-term UI. So you can maybe you've heard of Xamarin, and we're going to talk about Xamarin and how this relates, but really the idea here originally is we have all these .NET developers, right? They know like C# or something. And we kind of leverage that into them making these cross-platform apps. And it was originally just because you know how long Xamarin Forms has been around, it's been a while. We had this problem where we were either writing like native iOS, Objective-C, or you were writing native Android. We didn't have quite so many of these like third-party platform type, you know, where you can like write JavaScript or whatever and kick out a mobile app. So Microsoft was like, great, we'll write it in C# and we'll deploy it to both. Well, Xamarin never really got there. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. There's plenty of apps out there and that deploy to multiple stores, but the tooling and everything was always just like a little half-baked. Every time like Apple makes a huge update and something in iOS changes, then we have to wait for Xamarin to roll that change out before then we can implement that or upgrade our apps or do anything on that side. And so it's always this gamble of what if I've built my whole app on this premise and then one day Apple makes this big update and Microsoft doesn't life for my app. And Maui doesn't really have that problem. We're still working in this third-party space where I'm still writing C# and I'm kicking environments, but what they've tried to do is basically start over. So they're trying to take the best of what they learned works in Xamarin and start over on a new platform called Maui to do this cross-platform framework, but also including desktop apps. So not only are we talking about iOS and Android, but we're also talking about Windows Desktop and Macs, right? So you can write one app and deploy it everywhere. That solves all your problems. So it is open source. You can go out there and, yeah, question. Well, this is actually kind of older than Angular's idea of what, I mean, Xamarin Forms is, if you go look at the documentation, years old. And so I think the answer is yes, but also kind of doing this own thing of, we've got C#, so we're going to write C#. So yeah, extending this into the desktop applications, and then the open out there, you can go look at the GitHub, you can go look at all the pull requests, go see what efforts are being made on the Maui repo and like kind of look at their roadmap of what they're trying to accomplish. So that's ultimately, and then Maui, of course, multi-application user interface. Maui, right? At least we didn't get a weird version of Xamarin because you know how much it likes to name things. We use Teams at work. I always enjoy having teams and talking to students about working with their team on Teams. So it's always a good time. All right, so this is basically how it works, right? So all backed on .NET 6, which we were calling .NET Core, now we're .NET. And so running these items on the various platforms, right? We have one code base, one set of app logic, and then you just create these different UI layouts for whatever platforms that you're targeting. Right now, you can target Android 5.0, right? That's API 21 or higher. iOS 10 or higher. Mac, that's 10.15, which I can't remember what name that is person. Or Windows 10, as long as it's that version 1809 or higher, or then Windows 11. Quite a big spread of different platforms that you can write this in. I will note, because I'm not a Mac, but I do a lot of iOS work, which means I have to own a Mac, that you still have to own a Mac. Apple is not going to let you get away with building any iOS or for Mac desktop that doesn't actually get built through Xcode. So if you are a Windows person, you can connect Studio to a Mac client and build remotely, or you can build it directly on your Mac, either way, using the Visual Studio for Mac, which no one recommends. So you just connect Visual Studio and Windows to your... That's the idea. All right, so a little more technical works. So we have our app code, right? Whatever we've written for our application that, and then interacts with that MAUI API, which, one of those work packages that you can install in Visual Studio. It then consumes those native platform APIs that you can see there depending on which platform you're targeting, right? So the .NET for Android, the .NET for iOS. And then we kind of get a little deeper into how this works. So if you then are targeting, like in this .NET for Android, you can see my little bubbles there, then we then compile that down into our, the B. And then it will hit either that mono runtime, or if you're targeting the WinUI, that new core CLR stuff. And then you get actual native something that you can run on that device. And it's like a real high level technical thing because I have no idea what those things in the middle are. And for the most part, you don't need to care, right? It's like, I don't need to BCL and CLR and all these things are. But basically, Android apps that are built using MAUI compile from C# into intermediate, then into that just-in-time compiler, which if you're .NET is familiar with, and then into its native assembly. iOS is going to go from MAUI, and they're doing that ahead of time compiling, right? They call it the AOT, into that native ARM assembly code. If it's the Mac, actual Mac OS, then it's the Mac, and then if it's Windows, it's going to use that Windows UI 3 stuff. So maybe we care, maybe we don't. I think the biggest concern people always have is then, like, I'm building these, like, does my apps actually work like native apps, right? Can I still access, like, hardware? Can I still get to the accelerometers and things like that that maybe my app needs? And the answer to that is yes, but sometimes we have to take about it that maybe we, in the native side, wouldn't have to take such a weird way because of the way that that framework is built. So depending on how they've been exposed up through these layers, your MAUI app may have to make some interesting decisions. So 4, right? We know MAUI. If you want to write cross-platform apps in XAML and C# from a single shared code base in Visual Studio, then yes, this is great. Write it once, deploy it everywhere. Good idea. If you want to share like UI layout stuff and design across multiple platforms and not have to worry so much about like how stuff looks and having all these different UI layouts. Of course, it's one code base, so we share our tests, we can share our business logic. We're not setting all this stuff up in multiple places across multiple projects. And then, of course, write apps on your Mac or on your PC, and then you can compile them into those native app packages that are accepted by the wherever you're putting. That's basically it. If you've not tried it, sometimes I feel like I don't sell it because it was a frustrating tooling nightmare. With a lot of like restart Visual Studio because you just get a random error type thing. And Maui's gotten a little better about some of these things. I don't run into that stuff quite so much. So sometimes I feel like I write on this platform, apps on this platform, but I don't like it. And I think a lot of people feel that way about Xamarin. So we're really kind of hoping Maui solves some of those problems for us. So I showed you how it works, right? Frameworks, mono runtime, best profit. That's it, right? That's how it works. But it's a little bit than that. So does anybody use Blazor in anything that they're writing right now? I know sometimes people get super Blazor, right? So if you have been building things in Blazor, right, you can use Blazor with Maui. People are excited about because they want to build these like hybrid applications, right? So that's with C# instead of JavaScript, which again, script, like you said, is kind of eating the world, but this is, maybe some people don't like JavaScript. Some people are like, yes, preach, thank you. Yeah, so if you have those Blazor web, you built those, you're already familiar with them, you've already used those, you can put those directly, which is kind of huge. You still have access to all of those native device capabilities and the packaging. The Blazor desktop, I say, will be structured because that's not done yet. We just think we know what it's going to look like, similar to the way that Electron works. But this is not fully baked. So they're talking about it and tell it look like, but we don't know yet what that actually looks like. We do have all the UI, which is pretty awesome. So we have inherited accessibility support for our UI. We can create highly accessible applications, all of the semantic services. We have all these components, like this really rich ecosystem we use. We have all of these component kind of tooling companies that you can see there that are producing things that you can then use apps. So the UI part, I think, is the other part that people get excited about. There's a lot of ways that you can really make sure that everything looks seamless across all of your devices, fighting with all of these different like native UI layout editors and make kind of alternate design decisions because it looks this way on Android and then it looks this way on Apple, but I can't seem to get them to look the same. So yeah, that's one of the big selling points, I think, is build this UI and then you kind of just scale it to whatever you need or kind of make adjustments as needed. Now, the other side of that is some of you maybe are familiar with how picky Apple can be about some of the usability features, maybe the way menus work, the way different touch and gestures work. If you've ever had to submit anything but have it been rejected, didn't follow their guidelines, this can get you in trouble. Not from the Apple perspective of what they require, but you're just kind of like, this is what I want it to look like. And so you do have to still follow the rules and make sure that you're complying to whatever your platform requires, because there's and then you're not allowed to use it. Apple says you can. So yes, the specific device features that I worry about with like these third-party platforms and stuff. So access to sensors, compass, gyroscope, network connectivity. You can get all kinds of information about the device. You can access the clipboard. You can get all of the things really that you can get natively. There isn't anything that you can do natively that you can't do in Maui. So we do have access to all of these things, but again, they're exposed through that layer of stuff that you saw. So sometimes it's not exactly that access it natively, so we do have to kind of go review some documentation and try to figure out how did they make this work so they make it work. But they are promising every feature and things would be supported, so that's. And then, just thinking about UI and buttons and how this stuff works, kind of depending on how you've done this, like if you just use like a regular MAUI control button on your form, then that's going to inherit from our I button. And then depending on which platform you're targeting, you're going to get a different type of button handler, and it's going to compile out into whatever native button type that it should have been. Then you can access like different features or properties or whatever it is of the thing that you're trying to work with. So again, Microsoft has promised that we will have access to all of the things. That seems to be true. And so what do you need? You do need to have Studio 22. This is the .NET 6, so you do have to have that installed. You have to have the MAUI workload installed, which looks like this platform app development. It says build all these apps from a single code base. So I like that they just MAUI down there in the little text. It's not actually in the name. Good, I like that. Thanks, Mike. Familiarity with C#. Not like anything wild that really goes on in these apps, right? It's just business logic, being able to connect to data sources, being able to process data from the user, like whatever you're used to doing in whatever .NET platform you're already using, you're probably just going to do in your MAUI app. So what about Xamarin Forms? Because like I said, Microsoft's kind of just taking this like throw it away and start over approach. So Xamarin Forms 5, which is where is officially end of support, which burns people because there are still plenty of apps out there that are on inactive development. But again, the minute Apple or Google does something to change their platform enough, or change the way things, we can't proceed. We're stuck at this version. Cannot update our apps to a further version. We can't access any new features, anything like that. We were promised originally that Xamarin Forms 5.0 would get another year, and then MAUI rolled out, and then when they went, nope, November. Everyone got very so yeah, current releases will have the usual 2 years from a release support commitment from Microsoft, if they will hold to, which they've already showed us that they're not going to. A start in November of last year, when we're kind of expecting that was going to be the last one. If you go look at the repo, there's about 200 pull requests in that repo that they've just said, we're going to table these. Thanks. They did say that they were going to prioritize and try to put everything into a final release, but the team that was working on this is now the MAUI team and are working on current release stuff. I don't think so. They did say that they were going to try to prioritize and fix these things going forward. So if you're upgrading to MAUI or you're starting a new app in MAUI, then like these things wouldn't be a problem. But that does not help all of these apps that are still in Xamarin. So their option is either to stagnate and die where they're at, or rewrite and update, which I know a lot of us have kind of gotten into that situation with companies making big changes like that and then just basically rug pulling, which really stinks when you've got thousands of dollars of development time into something that you've now realized is kind of dead. So I've got a lot of links in here. I will share this presentation on like how to get started, the docs, how to build the apps. There's a bunch of walkthroughs on how to use stuff. MAUI for beginners with videos, all kinds of good stuff. And then awesome.NET MAUI is a bunch of samples and libraries and stuff like that that they have put out. So you can have access to these links. And then I have a demo for you. But before we demo, clarify, because I think some people probably don't know what the model view model pattern looks like. And so into the demo, I just want to clarify a couple of things, because that's the primary way that you write MAUI apps. So your base is written in XAML. right? If you're not familiar with XAML, you're going to see it in the demo, but it looks a lot like HTML, right? They have that code behind that might operate your interface, but then that creates that tight coupling situation that we really, so what this pattern helps us to do is separate that out, right? We have apps that are easier to test, they're easy to maintain, we get a lot of opportunities for code reuse, and then if you've got your kind of your business logic or back-end developers and your UI developers, they can collab easier without stepping all over each other. So if you're not familiar with this pattern, you know, this is ultimately how it works, right? We have the model, the view, and the view model, and I'll show you in the demo kind of how they work together, but then there's a nice little visual on how that works. But I think some people aren't maybe used to writing code in this kind of pattern, so I wanted to make sure that we just at least addressed it, show you what it looks like. So, now going back to, I didn't have a lot of time to work on this. This isn't my code. This is from the Xamarin community. It is an app called Monkey Finder. Monkey, this is where you go. So obviously I'm running this on Windows, so my Windows machine, I don't have any emulators or anything set up, but those are the options that I get up at the top. So Android, iOS local device, iOS simulators, iOS remote devices. I don't have access to my Mac build thingy here on, or I would show you that too, but I can show you how the app works. I'll show you how it works, and then I'll show you how it's put together. All right, here's our app. When it first loads, we can click this Get Monkeys button down. It should go out. Cross your fingers. What happens when you do stuff live? Okay, yeah, turn off the lights. All right, so it gives us the monkeys that I'm pulling in from a JSON file. When you click on one, you get this kind of detail view, shows us a picture. We get a show on map, gives us some text. If we click show on map, it should try to open whatever the device's built-in like default map handler is. In this case, Windows Maps opens for me, and it tries to locate, here is where I might find a baboon. Kind of far. Right, so we can go back and we can find another Japanese one. I could click on the detail. Right, and I assume it's in Japan. So this is where I might find one. Now I don't currently have location permissions in here. There's a find closest button, but when you click it, it's like, I don't have access to your location. Okay. Guess that's what I have. So I'll show you how this is put together here. So the entry point for these applications is it's called Maui program.cs. This is where you start to add in all of the different things that you have available for your applications. You can see in here that there is a font defined, and then we start to connect all of the different things that we're doing. So you can see in there, there's a thing about connectivity, about the geolocation, about there's a couple of references in here where you add in some of the different services and things that you've built. You can see I've got my monkey service. This is where that JSON file gets read in. The view model, the main page, that detail view model, and the details page. So this is where you basically declare all of the different things that you're going to be using inside of your app as you create them, so that you can access them and the app knows where they are. So looking at the main page, right? So I said XAML, it looks a lot like HTML, right? And so this is how we build our layouts. Now, some of us were really, really spoiled, and we grew up in .NET. We got really used to like being able to drag and drop buttons and design cute little layouts and stuff. Not anymore. Microsoft says no. you will ride it like this and you will enjoy it. So, dark mode only. Yes, I get on to my students about that. I always ask them to not come kill me if they use light mode. Maybe but we do have, and this isn't like a fairly new feature, but some of us might be here with the hot reload. So hot reload is basically a feature of Visual Studio that allows us to edit our XAML. Running application will update on the fly so that we can see our changes in real time. And so, believe it, no one has managed to. Proud. Close. This is so hard to close. It's like a trick. All right, if I wanted to change something in my Monkeys app on the fly, I could definitely do that. So in my app.xaml file, this is where we declare some of the kind of constants or display items that we might need. So you can see I've got some colors defined, some different types of labels and fonts and things in here that are defined to run this application. So again, it's still running. It's down here in the background. Change this color. So let's say I want to change this header color and I don't like this yellow anymore. Say I want to back in there, and then it just updates. I didn't have to rerun. I didn't have to save. I didn't have to. It knows to do it based on the change that is triggered from editing. And so this works for basically anything in your layout. If you add buttons or move anything around in that XAML, it's going to hot reload, and just you can keep that UI open while you're editing, and that gives you a visual view that maybe you're used to in web development where you make a change. And in this case, anything. And we can see that. I think I can probably track this. So if I come over, let's say, let's go back. This font right here is super tiny. So if I don't know what that is, like looking at this, and this is one of my things that I always harp on with my, again, I didn't write, I got it from the community, but it's like, if you know this isn't your code, how to find something, well then we have to like learn to read it, learn to dig in here and figure out what it is. So looking at this XAML, I have a pretty good idea that there are 3 labels right here, right? One says it's a medium label type, and 2 of them say label. Micro label is probably why I can't read that text, because it's small. And so I'm going to go back in my app XAML, and I'm going to micro label, which is, if you're super savvy with Visual Studio, you know you can right click on it, go to definition, and it will take you right to it. Right, so here label, right, we see that, and we can see right now the font size value is 10. So I definitely want it to be bigger. What if I'm like 12? We see it update. 14. Right, we'd update it again. Maybe I need it to be a lot bigger because I'm old and I can't. Wow. Self-burn. Yes, it does change fairly fast. It is good. So hot reload is all about. I can now save this, but it doesn't change anything about the reload properties, but that does mean that it's saved so that when I close and reopen, or so the hot reload is just for UI. Anything that would be like load, you would have to restart. Yep, so the hot reload is really only looking at your XAML stuff. Sometimes there's sneaky little code behind stuff that you can get away with, but for the most part, because it's what it's running, it's going to have to restart. You can edit things, and then it'll be like, if you want to see this, you have to restart. Like, it gives you the message about, hey. Did you mean? So I talked about this view model. So I can show you what this looks like, and use the magnifier. Will be. Right, so we can see in here we've got views, right? We saw the two views. There's the main page, and then when I click on a monkey, there's the details page. We can see there's view models in here, base view model, as well as the two view models that we expect, because sometimes we do want to go in there and buy things that are part of that kind of base class that it's going to inherit from. So if you have that base view model, that's kind of like your layout view model, you can go in there and mess with anything, and then it will inherit down to any other view models that you create. But my view models are essentially, a lot of this type of data connection and things is happening, and so you can see you can set up different properties. I can set up different types of these kind of like task-based methods. You can do them, with asynchronous. Here's where it's looking for internet connectivity to make sure that we are in fact connected to the internet before we try to do this. It's going to call that monkey service. That's what I said, where that JSON file is being read in. There is code. We go into the services section to actually pull this from a public website as well. So if you wanted to go get it from this website, you can do that. But then there's also the kind of offline version for being able to just read that in. This is pretty straightforward. So yeah, that's kind of the deal. Yeah, question? All of it. It is a MAUI type project. What this means is all of this, I can then export it to Windows, export it to Mac, export it to Android, export it to iOS. It would all look this, all this code is the logic, all of these sections like to my JSON file or whatever I was using would all just work. Thing to change that to get them to compile into their native. Yes, good question. So if you want to come in here, some of these things are probably familiar if you're used to doing Android apps, right? You've got your Android manifest, you've got your assembly info, your main activity, which is that entry point for the application. If there are things that you need to go in here and with, again, if we go into the iOS, right, there's our app delegate. If you need to go set things up in there. So yeah, if you need to do your platform specific things to actually go in there and do something, you can go in there and do those. But otherwise, this is all going to just whatever app you're targeting. Yeah. I am not aware that they allowed that, Maui. Yeah. So the question was, can you escape C# and write code in other languages? I'm not aware that they let you import like other packages or call other code that is C#. Yeah. Because they didn't, yeah, you're right, Xamarin either. They wanted to buy it. Well, and then we had this issue in Xamarin where, you would have things that you needed to do on the native side that were maybe, like I needed to do this thing that's specific to iOS. And you would end up writing like these custom renders and things. And then have all of these kind of like custom renders or overrides or tooling and control files for all of your different platforms. And Maui's really from all of that to stick you in the one project, so all of that code ultimately resides in that shared code base. Getting even further away from what that was. Yes. So it depends on the kind of component. So Apple's process is really more about the types of menuing and the way that you're expressing menus. Some of the things about like flyouts and stuff like that. So it really comes down to there are some controls that probably aren't going to pass. You either can't use those controls, or you have to then try to abstract out and create a completely different Apple process, which is kind of the idea of what MAUI is trying to do. So it's you have to design your app to look a very specific way that meets all the criteria of the support, so that it will. And hopefully not get yourself off in this land of different UIs. Other questions? For those of you who are fair, is this weird? Is it understandable? I always like to check. I'm living on the edge up here. I didn't plug my laptop in. I'm living dangerous. Yeah, so it's a fairly small kind of example, but these things, they do get quite large, So really it's more just about understanding this structure, especially if you're not familiar with the pattern, getting yourself a little familiar with like things, not familiar with writing in XAML. And then you'll kind of run into those platform specific things as they happen. Now, MAUI's documentation is already pretty good. We've got some things that aren't done yet. It's definitely some accessible documentation, which is where Microsoft sells over some other platforms. I would say the only way that you're going to get into stuff that's like you really have to is if you have like what Fred was talking about, where you've got controls that you want to use, but then Apple's not going to like. You might have to change up some UI stuff. You just change your whole design maybe so that you don't use those controls. But trying to get into like any of those native things that you use. So if you're wanting to access cameras or file storage or just that local kind of key pair storage, you can use all of that. The GPS and everything, that's the big things that most people access in their apps. And all of that is easily accessible from just inside of whatever business you got in your view models. You don't have to dig in. You don't have to add a bunch of packages or anything to make that work. It's already just all been. Because again, that's kind of what the plan is. They take those native packages and just kind of like wrap them in C# methods that you can access. You don't have to work too hard. All right, other questions? Yes. Hold on a second. Oh, no one told me that they couldn't see the code. What? No one on stream. I was trying to watch the chat and they were telling me that they couldn't. I feel bad. I'll tell you the stream. Sorry, here it is. And you'll get access to this project too, because it's sorry, Levi, repeat your question. Free stream people. I still love you. So can you repeat the question for me? Now that I troubleshooting things on the fly up here. Yeah. Right. Right. So yeah, the question is why pick Maui over other platforms like Flutter, and I'm not even familiar with all of them because there's a lot now. So Kirsten, did you answer the question? What was the answer? Oh, okay. She's already forgotten. No, I think the big thing is like you want to use C#. Like that's the main reason. You like the tooling. Me too. But otherwise there really isn't. Like, remember going back to Xamarin was kind of like fit with this idea, but it was kind of really screwed up, and so no one really liked it for several iterations, which gave time for all these to arise. And then yeah, so if you like the process Maui provides and being able to write it in C#, that's your selling point, you know. Otherwise use something else, and it's free. So I know some of those other ones you got to pay for, so that's the other selling point, free. Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, having built an app on this for a little while for a client, that the process of actually like getting them into the App Store is very smooth. Like the compilation process and everything. I'd say the hardest part is the fact that because I don't develop on Mac and I have a Mac agent that I build, then when I want to deploy to the Apple Store, I have to get on the Mac, I have to pull up my package, I've got to, you know, do my deployment through there, and so I'm kind of dealing with that, and I have my certificates and everything in there, and so I'm kind of a whole nother thing I've got to handle anytime I've got to make a new deployment. So that's like the hardest part. Otherwise, you know, you can go in there and tell it, I want to build, what are those package files that Android takes now, AABs or whatever, not APKs. Well, you can build either one. You can set up all your licenses and everything in there, so you've got your, you know, the different signing certifications that you need for your packages. Those ones, it's just going to spit out a Windows exe that you can then package for deployment if you wanted. And then same for Mac, you know, it's just going to spit out something for your Mac. So yeah, it's a fairly easy process, and for whatever platforms you're targeting. So I've not used any of these other like third parties too much, so I can't tell you if there's harder or easier like that, but that's just my experience. I'm not a Mac person, so I have curiosity. All right, well, sorry, stream people, you didn't get to see the code too much. I can run back through it, but you will have access to the project. It's in the slides. So when I post the slides, there's a section in community projects, and you'll find monkey finder. Monkey finder.